Hello, all you beautiful people. Sorry that it's been so long. I know it's been absolutely ages. A little over 5 months. Had most of it done in 3, but this video is taking a really long time to actually put together, so I hope it's good enough for you. So, quick reminder, make it an Unreal 5 parkour game with some sort of random mechanics. Very reminiscent of Mirror's Edge and Ultra Kill. Lots of swinging around and dashing and wall running, just general movement-based stuff. In the last devlog, I said that by the time I made this video, I wanted to have some further development into the mechanics and design. So here's a quick list that I said. I wanted wall running, swinging, grappling, vaulting, air dash, and simple combat, as well as some visual aesthetics, tone, story, and at least one test level design. I did manage to get most of that done. The only things I'm missing are some further aesthetic and tone choices, story, and combat, but I got most of the movement mechanics worked out and some test levels. So we'll go through those one by one. So here we have a test level, just a quick little demo that I can use to prototype all of the different movement. Nothing too crazy going on. I do have a more complicated one coming up later. I did work on a little character model with some animations that I imported from Mixamo. I don't have any endorsement deal from them, but I think they're a really cool resource that you can use. You can get all sorts of pre-rigged character models and animations that you can pretty easily import to most game engines or 3D modeling softwares. So we got all the basic stuff like running and jumping. I also implemented crouching, which doesn't really have an animation. There is sliding, but it also doesn't have an animation, so it kind of just looks like crouch walking. I added some landing animations, so we got this roll as well as this hard landing. I also added in some basic swinging, but it does break the animations right now, so still needs some work to be done on it, and I don't have grappling working quite yet, but it's a pretty simple mechanic, so it shouldn't take too long to actually implement that. So I also added a basic Yep, okay. This is happening. Oh, yeah, of course. So we'll just pretend that didn't happen. So, when dash decides to actually work, it's just a simple little thing that pushes the character in whatever direction the camera is facing. So you can sort of use it like a double jump or just a dash to get across gaps. And of course, I added a quick little slow-mo mechanic. I don't know if it'll be in the final game, but for right now, it's just a nice little tool to help aim where I'm actually wanting to go. And then of course, classic wall run. It is pretty difficult to control right now, but as I continue tweaking it, it should be pretty effortless by the end. So in this next section, we'll look at this cool level design that I made. So this was all done in Blender. Basically everything was done by hand. I did import some textures, but everything else that you see was made by me. So this was my first little attempt at doing real level design as opposed to just a sort of sandbox with a bunch of stuff the character can interact with. So I wanted to actually do a little bit of research into what level design and environmental design really is. So I went and found this level designer's personal resume site, like portfolio kind of thing. And he has some really cool level designs in here. And it really helped me sort of understand line of sight and flow and just the most basic ideas of what level design actually is. Especially when it comes to levels that have multiple paths and directions that you can take to reach the same goal. Because those have their own difficulties as opposed to just very linear or very open areas. So the player will start picking up this little briefcase, and the goal is to deliver it all the way across the map to this little trash can mailbox looking thing. And like I said before, there's a bunch of different ways to actually get from point A to point B, and that's something that was really important to me to try and get right during this first prototype level, because I wanted to actually understand what I was doing and understand what makes a good multi-path level. So we have this path where the player can run across, this crane will pick them up, pull them back up into the air. They can either jump across to the building or swing off of this drone, where they can land on this little ramp and get across that way. Or they can run across these buildings, fight through these guys, and get across that direction. Now, unlike Blender, I did need to use some tutorials for figuring out a bunch of this stuff over in Unreal Engine, and there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible and just leave about a minute for each different mechanic. First thing we can look at is jumping. There's been some changes to jumping. As you can see, it's now a lot more complicated than just press a button and you go up. This is because I want, if you're on a slope or wall running, I want the jump button to do something different and propel you in a slightly different direction than just straight up. So I have a bunch of crazy vector math and checks and casts and whatever else before it ends up putting you into the falling state. So likewise, with the falling state, it has changed slightly. So this is probably the size of the code that it was before. This is the size of the code now. All of this is just for understanding how falling works and making sure that you will be doing the things you're supposed to when you're in the falling state. So the main reason that there's this massive end part is to handle different types of landings after you stop falling. So the hard landing, we set a bunch of variables and then we just make you stand. Same with the running landing, we set some variables, we play some animations with these blue heel things. But the roll landing, I actually had to do some extra stuff so that you're actually propelled forwards when you're rolling as opposed to just rolling in place, which looks very silly. Not much has changed in sprinting, crouching, sliding. This is all pretty much identical, other than some tweaks that I've made to some of the functions. It's pretty much identical to what it was before. However, we get down to dashing. This is probably one of the easier mechanics that I've had to implement. It basically just checks if you press the dash button, and if you're not currently dashing, then you will start dashing. And it'll just get a forward vector based off of where the camera is looking and launch the character in that direction. And then, based off of a certain delay that I have here to make sure that, you're dashing for at least a certain amount of time, then it'll check if you're grounded, and it will assign you a new state depending on what is currently happening. Next up is wall running. You might have noticed during my little demo that I have a sphere around the character, and that is actually a wall run trigger. Usually, when somebody's making wall running, they tell you, oh, just shoot a ray cast or a sphere cast off to the left and right, and you can do stuff with that. But I don't particularly like that, and I don't know if my version is any better, but it's the version that I decided to go with because I thought it up a year or two ago when I was just a wee lad in the computer science program, and I kind of just want to try it out and see how good it is. Whenever it detects that we've overlapped a wall, it will run this little function. This will only trigger when we overlap with a wall that we are capable of running on, based off of some fancy layers and channel stuff that I had to do. But it'll start this little timer tick and apply a pressure towards the wall so that you stick to it, and it will disable gravity so that you don't just fall straight off of the wall. And then it will continue to check every time that it ticks to see if you should still be wall running. And if you should be, then it keeps going, and if you shouldn't be, it will stop wall running and set you to falling, which will send you all the way back up into this giant mess. I did try to implement vaulting and mounting and mantling and all of those special words, but there is some weird stuff with all of the tutorials I looked at with motion warping that I was unable to understand or fix in a way that makes sense. So instead, all that happens when you try to motion warp is you lose all collision and you slowly float forwards with no gravity, which isn't really what we're looking for, so I just sort of left this for another day. Finally, we get to the spider web that is swinging and grappling. There's a lot of lines here, and it's pretty disgusting to look at, honestly. But I'll try my best to explain my way through this. So whenever you press your primary fire, if you are in slow motion mode and looking at a valid target, it will check for that valid target, save the hit vector, so you know where you actually hit the target, and then it will check if you are tapping or holding the button. If you hold the button, then it will just drag you towards the point that you hit until you hit the point, and then it will stop and make you fall. If you just tap the button, it will keep you a certain distance away from that point so that you don't drift off, using some math in here, and it'll also apply a forward force to keep you swinging. Then whenever you're done swinging, it will disconnect you, and it will play a nice little animation that took me way too long to get working. You might notice over here that the primary fire says normal gun shit, but I never actually got around to doing this because in the process of developing all of this stuff, I've made some changes to my idea for what combat will look like inside of this game. But we'll get to that a little later. I want to show off my animation state machine. So this is all some pretty basic stuff. What's really fun is when we go into our actual state machine. So in here, it gets to be a real mess. I did have this locomotion blend thing active before, but it wasn't nearly as complex as it is now. So now we have this weird little diamond shape of all of our different animations, and these are all animations that I pulled off of Mixamo, which is an Adobe royalty-free animation site where you can just download a bunch of stuff free for commercial use. It has pretty much anything that I needed, but I will still need to modify some of the animations, obviously. So I downloaded a bunch more animations, made some different poses and blend shapes, and then I have all of this nonsense here. So, mantle is over to the side, it doesn't work. We have just a simple jump animation, ball animation, and all of these little dots have some sort of rule to tell the state machine when to initiate the next animation. So as you can see, a lot of these are just simple variable checks, but some are a little more complicated, like this one, and some are really complicated, like whatever this is. This took me a really long time to figure out, and it's kind of not worth trying to explain. There are about a dozen different tutorials I looked at to try and understand all of this animation nonsense, and it would probably take me about 20 minutes to try and list all of the tutorials and forums and stuff I went through, because nothing works like how people say it does. I'll leave some decent sources in the description, maybe not ones that I specifically used, but things that I think are helpful and actually make sense as opposed to some of the stuff I found. And then the final thing that I implemented was this dev HUD. This is a simple heads-up display that just sort of creates random stuff and puts it on the screen. So I added some text and a basic cursor so that you can see where you're pointing. The text is just there so I can keep track of what values all of these different variables are set to. and this has really been a major help in debugging a lot of different things, as well as the normal, print string and console log debug functions. But this has been a major help in finding all sorts of problems. So the last thing I want to show off is the new ideas we had for our combat system. You all might remember this mess of a design document that I had before, but since then we have sort of honed in what this game actually is and what all the mechanics are going to be. As you might remember, originally this was just going to be a simple shooter for combat, as well as like some random extra moves that you could do just to spice things up. Hello, is this going to work? Oh, good. Alright, so this is a different audio quality because it's like 4 months late. I don't even know how much later it is. This video sucked to make because I suck. It took me like 6 months, actually longer, I think. I don't even know how long it's been. It's been a really long time. I don't know what I'm gonna do next. My life is a train wreck, and I just need to sort of do random little fiddly bits and just sort of mess around with stuff. So I don't think I'm actually gonna give like what I want to do next, because I'm just gonna do some random stuff and we'll see where it goes from there. So I do have a Ko-Fi or a coffee or whatever it's called if you want to support me and help me have the strength to keep doing this garbage. I don't know what buy me a coffee on there, or come and hang out in the Discord or Twitch stream. Anyways, that's all I have for the outro. Kind of a little more of a disaster than the first one, but that's just sort of how it is right now. Hopefully I see you again sometime. I got some other garbage you could go watch. I don't know. Bye.